And we're live with Jeff and Andrew to talk about Homicide Life on the Street episode, Red Red Wine. Over to Jeff.
Yeah, that's season 7, episode 5. And it's written by Sarah B. Charno and directed by Ed Bianchi. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing either one of those names right. And it originally aired November 6, 1998 on NBC, of course. I'm going to read this brief recap from TV.com and then turn it over to Ben. Ballard is annoyed when she finds out the fact that she had a date with Falzone is all around the squad room. Munch has a doctor's appointment and he's not talking about it. Dr. Griscom calls on the homicide unit when he sees a number of deaths that are related by a poison named phosphazine. The FBI steps in on the poisonings and they put Mike Giardello in charge of a task force. They consider it an act of domestic terrorism. One of the victims was a priest. 2 others were his parishioners. Gardy suspects the communion wine. Following this idea, wine bottles are collected from churches around the city. A needle hole was found through one of the corks. A citywide canvassing of all places where wine can be purchased is launched. G disagrees with the Bureau's policy of keeping information from the public. One possible suspect is captured. However strange as he is, he's not the one. Through an internal leak, the media is alerted and warns the public, sparking chaos. Mike suspects the source of the media leak is his father, and G doesn't deny it. Further investigations lead to a phosphazine delivery in which one bottle was allegedly damaged and discarded. The delivery driver, whom Bayless and Shepard had already encountered, is arrested. So that's the gist of that one. Ben, what'd you think?
Right, the notes that I have made. I think that up until the end, I was thinking this was about an 8 out of 10. But that sort of scene between Bayless and Shepard, 2 characters I don't really care for because Bayless I'm just bored by now. And so it's like I just I've written here that final scene sort of dragged it down a point to 7 out of 10. And I actually skipped half of that scene because my eyes were getting strained from too much rolling.
Morgan agreed with you, by the way. He was already tired of Bayless by this point, too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the bit where Lewis comes out and actually says, "Little G," and then Munch says, "Chip off the old boulder."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there could be what we got here. Oh yeah, there was a female teenager earlier on, and she didn't half look like an Enneagram 4 NF. that teenage. I mean, how she even said, Aunt, I don't know what her name was a very ordinary person. She worked in accounts. Just using that in a derogatory sense, like, oh, she was ordinary. There's Jonathan's reaction to that. Just a random. An SJ named ship, HMS Inflexible. Right. Munch on. You mentioned Gulf War syndrome. I think that was a theory that it was caused by the various vaccinations that were given to the troops because they thought Saddam Hussein might have his troops use chemical weapons. And there was also some theory about maybe the depleted uranium in some of the depleted uranium in some of the tank shells. Well, arrows in the APF. Armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabo things. The things that shoot out of the tanks towards other tanks has depleted uranium in it, and they thought maybe that contributed towards Gulf War syndrome. But people have to look that up themselves. There's just one little thing where someone said they could care less, but now some Americans get it right, and it's couldn't care less, i.e., caring less is not possible. Right, what we got here? Oh yeah, here was an interesting bit. What I found funny. Oh yeah, a good line from Munch. Maybe it's that he's talking to someone on the phone about, she's talking about having a black tongue. And he says, maybe it's scurvy. Have you been lost at sea recently? And what interests me most about this episode is there's a political thing about, right, should this really be an FBI case? We'll put that to one side. But I found interesting is the fact that you've got G in like the ESTJ sort of like battle of like, right, and him being in charge even when he is officially not in charge. And so you've got him like contacting the press and going from, and you've got this thing within him, and maybe within his type of, you've got him respecting the chain of command, but you've got the thing of him also respecting public safety, because like Kersey's ultimate name for SJs was logistical safekeepers. So I thought that was interesting for ESTJs, that of the SJs, they're the most likely to maybe book the system and take over.
You said logistical what?
Safekeepers.
Safekeepers, okay.
Yeah. What did you think about that aspect, about the SJ aspect of G?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in that he's simultaneously sort of trying to be in control, but I don't think that the concern for public safety was in any way like an excuse for that. I think he really did believe that what he was saying. So yeah, it's like he feels like he has a responsibility to the public as well as his bosses. So, and it's not even completely his bosses because he's dealing with the FBI too. So, and then of course you have the family dynamic and the fact that it's his son.
Yeah.
And they've already established that their relationship is a little bit rocky, and mostly just him, at least in the perception of his son not being there. So it's more like a lack of relationship than it is necessarily a bad relationship. But this episode sort of illustrates when they have had conflicts, what some of them may have been, because Mike says something to the effect of too stubborn or whatever, and basically it's like they're knocking heads over G feeling like he always has to be right or whatever. They have the sort of humorous side thing about the floor buckling because he doesn't take to do that.
Yeah, the lino.
Yeah. So
I thought what was interesting is what we can say about the ESTJ in that it's like the instinct is to respect authority with G, but it's like when his bosses, when he knows that they're not as competent as they should be, then obviously he's not going to be a robot. He is going to think for himself.
Right. So his attitude is that you're supposed to respect authority, so he views it differently than, SPs would, but he's like not but he's not like trying the whole time to cause problems for the authority figures, but he's also has his own like separate viewpoint on what's respecting or taking care of the public, his responsibility to the public. So he's willing to do certain things that are still in his morality are all right to do, even if your superiors don't necessarily approve them. He wouldn't have done something where he publicly, like he wouldn't have said to the media, like, he told the lady that, you didn't hear this from me. So he wasn't coming out and doing any kind of public thing where he was like, I don't agree with what they're doing. So he wasn't trying to do something where he undermined their authority in public. He was doing it behind the scenes to initiate what he thought was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and we've had, Andrew, we've had like previous stories where this whole thing where I think the character was played by Al Freeman Jr., is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, the commissioner guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the commissioner. And so they had this thing where Al Giardillo wouldn't play ball in terms of working with the hierarchy, and sort of like he was like putting like, I think either his police officers first. I can't quite remember the details of the plot, but it was like, and they actually put this other SJ who was not as competent, and they made him the boss above G. So there is this thing.
Yeah, there's a big history there in terms of how and there is kind of a constant conflict in terms of that, because that is the thing that seems to be that tear him up the most, is like him trying to do his job and trying to respect authority, but also not wanting to get involved in what he thinks are underhanded kind of political moves, whether or not his bosses want them or not. Like, so he has his own morality system, which seems pretty consistent with STJ types to me, is that, he still has the guardian temperament and wants to do what he's supposed to do, quote unquote, but he also has his own viewpoints and doesn't want to break his own morality system too.
Yep. So it's still all pretty consistent. What did you think of it, Andrew?
I like this episode. I would say I would give it an 8. I did like it. I did what you've already discussed with G and Mike. That dynamic is interesting. And what you said, Jeff, about there being, I could see like a lack of relationship rather than just even a bad one. It's like they don't really, at first I didn't know they were even related. So yeah, because I've only seen the 3 episodes, but it was a good episode from what I've seen. And I liked how Munch, like his little storyline, but also how he questioned the use of the pronoun he when everyone assumed it was a he, and he sort of like was trying to question or be kind of critical of that. Or and then his jokes were really good. I feel like Munch in this episode had some really good one-liners. So let's see. I made a few more notes, but I'm not sure. I think he went over. You all have gone over most of it.
Yeah, Munch said that women were more likely to poison people than men.
Right.
Yep.
So men are more likely to shoot somebody or punch somebody in the face or whatever, but less likely to poison someone.
He had that quick, I think, one-liner with when one of his partner was saying, "Oh, I need to throw all my wine down the toilet." He's like, "It doesn't apply to you. It's only for one wine that's corked, not screw like a screw top." So.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then I just really like the story. I like the structure of the story, and I kind of liked how it was maybe domestic terrorism and the involvement with the FBI. I liked how it was written. So yeah.
Really, was he a domestic terrorist or just a serial killer?
Right, like a nihilist? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, should it really be an FBI case? I mean,
yeah, maybe not, because it didn't seem like he had any motive other than he said that he wanted to make a mark, make a difference in some way. So.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, and like you said, it's a whole other topic of discussion, but it's kind of one of those things you wonder how 9/11 changed and the subsequent, sort of chemical warfare stuff that came up after that, whether this case, would have been dealt with the same way, or it would have even been more federal involvement. Because after that, it was like any kind of suspicion of any kind of chemical substance, it immediately was like, a Homeland Security thing,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
this kind of shows that already at this point even in the late 90s, there was already plenty of federal involvement in something like that.
and also, and I suppose the feelings of the local police are, it's like, don't necessarily, I mean, they might welcome the help of the FBI. It sort of takes the pressure off them. One doesn't really know what are the feelings of the local police on this issue? It's probably varied.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of seems like one of those things, and they've had that on the show already when those cases have come up, that it seems like it sort of goes both ways. They'll grouse about the federal involvement, but on the other hand, it's sort of like that's part of the deal that they have to say, sort of have a scapegoat for if something goes wrong with the investigation. They can kind of look at it as, well, we weren't the ones really doing it. So, you know, and the other thing I was going to say about the board was the names really piled up under Bayless. Because the one thing they seem consistent with is if there's another case that comes up that seems to relate to a previous case, the same primary detective gets those cases too. So you can very quickly have a bunch of red under their name. And that happened with Bayless, of course, with the sniper case. So you had, you know, a bunch of people. But the thing I noticed was that the last names under Bayless before the ones from this episode were from the first episode of season 7. So apparently he hasn't had any cases since then. So he needed something to do.
So does it mean that he's going to like win a prize at the end of the year or something?
Only if he clears everything. But other thing I noticed is in the guest star list there, Austin Pendleton is the guy who played the medical examiner.
Yeah, he was good.
And I think this was his first appearance. So he'll make several more appearances throughout this final season, and I like him. I can't remember what else I've seen him in. He's one of those people that, you know, immediately looked familiar, like I know I've seen him in other stuff, but then when I looked it up, I couldn't immediately think of what else that was on the list I had actually seen. But yeah, either he looks and sounds a whole lot like somebody else, or I've seen him in something else and stolen what it was. But overall, I liked his character. And there's one episode later in this season where that features him a little bit more, in fact, and it's actually probably one of my favorite episodes of the season because it's interesting. Like in the final season, they were doing a little of experimenting, I think, with certain kind of different cases that didn't fit everything else, and so it's kind of one of those type of deals. And this sort of was too, but. Anyway, I've got to get going, but I think Ben, you said you'd give it a 7, and Andrew said 8. I would probably go with 7 also. I think it's a solid episode. It held my attention. There wasn't anything spectacular in it, but I thought it was pretty well paced. And like you said, I liked, you know, Munch's jokes, and, you know, a lot of the kind of dialogue flowed pretty well. So I thought, you know, it was overall just a pretty solid episode. So I'd give it a 7. And if you guys want to talk further, you know, obviously you're allowed to do that, but I've got to bow out. So join me in a couple of weeks, because I'm probably next weekend I'll be out of town and for Christmas and all that. But in a couple of weeks I'll be back, and we'll go to old Wanted, Dead or Alive.
Right.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye,
see you, Jeff.
One point it might be from the episode, and I'll read this for the audience, is there's that bit where initially Bayless was the primary, but then when the FBI took over and then they put Little G, Mike Giardello, in charge, I'm wondering if that means it all gets shifted over to him, and so it becomes his clearances rather than Bayless's. And I wonder if I was writing it, I would have a little scene in the next episode about who gets the credit,
Right,
for that, because of the changeover.
yeah. Did you say you were kind of tiring of Bayless in a way?
Oh yes, because it's like, to be honest, SJs are not that interesting as fictional characters. Unless they're sort of like going through like a lot of like difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it can be in the, I think I showed you, I know I showed Bradley, I think I showed you a real SJ. See, the SJs in real life, they have a little bit of NP in them.
Right.
And Bradley was saying that they do a little bit of it, and then you think that you can you can get NP with them. Oh, they're NP now. But then they like shut it off and then go back to their normal mode. Whereas when you tend to write, SJs tend to be written just as SJs. They don't write that little bit of NP in them, that little bit of...
So it gets kind of repetitive or boring after a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just that the character... All characters only have so much amount of mileage in them. Unless it's a character like Munch and, say, the Doctor in Doctor Who, where the whole basis of the character is them saying certain things. So it's just like the character is like a vehicle for things to be said. I don't know if you probably did watch Law and Order.
I have seen a Law and Order, yes.
So the guy on there that just is the guy, a bit of a one-liner machine, but he's like one-liners. So like his central trait, so his character trait is going to be the variety of things that he says all the while, because he's always saying different things. And so this is why there's so much mileage in Munch, because Munch is the lines he says, his particular point of view. And so that's why he's lasted about 200 episodes across different programs. I'm not joking there, folks. It probably is about 200 episodes of different things that character's been in by now.
And I could see how I wouldn't tire of Munch, like for 200, 300 episodes. Like I wouldn't get tired of that if that's his character. You know, I could enjoy that. So
because really it's the lines that he's saying. It's what you would get tired of though. Is that if everyone was like that, say in a bad sitcom?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Where everyone's just a one-liner machine.
Yeah.
Right, and you can even
I don't even like that for one episode.
Yeah, and you can even have that with sitcoms where a sitcom is funny, but everyone's just a one-liner machine and you're not enjoying it in between the jokes. It's got to have something extra.
Right.
To it. So, and maybe another series that we could review in the future is Andrew could join us for reviews with Haley of Yes, Prime Minister. No! I mean, Yes, Minister! No, did not hear what I said? Yes, Minister. Yes, Minister. I just said Yes, Minister. Right then. I better end now. I just made a bit of a gaffe. Yes, Minister. Right, damn it. Anyway, Haley won't have watched this review, so I'll be okay. Right, so I better go now, folks. I've just done a gaff. Right.